Diddy party stories. Man, that was like some weird memory lane stuff.
Ashton Kutcher taking the stand, testifying against a man accused of being...
A word of caution before we start. What you're about to hear requires discretion. This content is intended for learning and amusement only. What follows is the exact federal court testimony from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, based on reports by Inner City Press. Many know Ashton Kutcher as the delightful trickster, the lovable romantic lead, or the astute technology entrepreneur. However, on a damp spring morning in a New York City courtroom, this very individual appeared not in his famous persona, but as a witness in a deeply unsettling celebrity trial of our times. As Sean Diddy Combs confronted an extensive array of accusations from trafficking to systematic abuse, Kutcher, formerly part of Diddy's notorious Hollywood circle, was compelled to testify. A profound quiet settled in the room before Ashton began to speak. His words astonished the court. Kutcher's purpose was not merely to disassociate from Diddy. He was present to unveil an unforeseen revelation, a startling confession, an act of disloyalty, and a secret with the potential to alter the entire situation. This marks the point. Ashton Kutcher became a witness. This narrates the events of the day he ended his silence. The courtroom air was thick with tension, more so than usual, despite the trial already being filled with explosive disclosures. Yet when Ashton Kutcher took the witness stand on the 9th day of the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, the mood in the room transformed. A distinct type of quiet fell. Kutcher's entrance was not that of a Hollywood star accustomed to glamorous premieres. He appeared like someone trapped. His necktie felt constricting, his forehead was moist, and his gaze searched for a non-existent escape. For the first time, this wasn't a performance on a set. He was sworn to tell the truth. For weeks, the media had pondered the possibility of Kutcher's involvement being mentioned. Following Diddy's arrest, numerous photos, investment details, and accounts of social gatherings with Combs had come to light, prompting Ashton's representatives to work tirelessly to manage the narrative of their past association. However, no public relations effort could alter the evidence uncovered by the prosecution. Kutcher's name was found in letters, security records, financial statements, and most critically, in several videos taken from Diddy's property. Mr. Kutcher, the prosecutor started, "Are you familiar with this picture?" Kutcher briefly looked at the display. The image was unclear, yet it was unmistakably him. Shirt partly open, a beverage in his hand, chuckling in a poorly lit space. Surrounding him, other faces were obscured to protect their identities. "Yes," he replied, gulping. "That was from 2009 at Diddy's white party." And this marked the beginning of numerous acknowledgments. As his testimony continued, the meticulously crafted public image started to fall apart. Initially, Kutcher spoke with composure, but his voice quivered slightly. "We were friends," he stated, referring to Combs. "I admired him, but there were incidents I witnessed, incidents I chose to overlook." He then described the formation of what was known as the New Hollywood Rat Pack. This group included Diddy, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama. It started with social gatherings, evolved into business dealings, and then transformed into something different. A shift occurred, Kutcher noted. "How it changed from private parties to what I would term curated experiences, and I failed to inquire sufficiently." The prosecution then questioned if he had ever observed illegal activities. Kutcher hesitated. "At that moment, I didn't comprehend what I was observing. That's the excuse I've been using, but I understand the truth now." He confessed that Combs frequently employed a distinct crew for private areas, individuals who would take phones, guide attendees to specific locations, and have non-disclosure agreements signed on the spot. Ashton disclosed that he too had signed several NDAs over time. "I assumed it was common practice," he remarked. "It was something everyone engaged in." Then the recordings were presented. The court played an audio clip from a 2013 party at one of Diddy's residences. Music and laughter were audible, followed by Ashton's voice. "I don't believe this should be recorded," he stated. "Honestly, this is excessive." Another person replied, "Calm down. Everything is under control. They've already signed the papers." The prosecutor faced Ashton. "To whom were you referring?" He paused, his gaze shifting towards Diddy, who remained expressionless at the defendant's table. "Attendees," Ashton eventually answered. "Some were models, others were not, but they hadn't been informed about what was planned." "Not entirely." As the first part concluded, Ashton's testimony extended beyond Diddy. It touched on shared responsibility, on an environment of quiet required to that benefited conformists and penalized dissenters. It grew evident that Kutcher had previously been among those who conformed. Now, however, before a judge and jury, he was endeavoring to be different. Ashton's testimony proceeded into the afternoon, now focusing on the notorious era of the new Hollywood Rat Pack. It consisted of myself, Diddy, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Valderrama, he stated. We termed it a modern fraternity, but looking back, it functioned like an apparatus. He shared anecdotes that once seemed alluring: private aircraft to undisclosed destinations, continuous revelries in opulent homes devoid of timepieces or external views. Yet these narratives now carried a dark undertone. At those gatherings, entire sections were accessible only to a select few, Ashton explained. Entry required approval. He added, I never questioned who granted this approval. The prosecutor probed further. Did you ever witness any unlawful or exploitative acts? Gee, Ashton let out a sharp breath. Not directly, he replied, but I was aware of certain matters and I chose to disregard them. I dismissed them with humor. I convinced myself they were mere hearsay. He then described a specific event, a private celebration on a yacht in 2012. Diddy introduced a group of young ladies. The majority were models or social media personalities. He mentioned, Diddy said, they've all consented. There's no risk. I recall laughing at that. I regret doing so. He discussed the changing interactions within their group. Danny became more troubled, he stated, alluding to Masterson, more distrustful, more manipulative. Diddy and Danny were particularly tight during that period. The court then presented video from Diddy's 2009 white party, which Kutcher had co-organized. That event was my concept, he confessed. Publicly, we claimed to be supporting charitable causes, but privately, I believe our agenda was quite different. He informed the court that over time, he too began to conceal things. Success in Hollywood requires knowing when to remain silent. I was earning a fortune. I had an image to maintain, and I was unwilling to jeopardize it. He further described how individuals who inquired excessively were subsequently excluded from events. There was an approved list of attendees and an unofficial list of those barred, he said. One did not defy Sean Combs. This was common knowledge. He also mentioned a disturbing incident involving a female guest and another celebrity whose identity was kept confidential in court. I inquired if she was all right. Her response was, I was instructed not to speak. That incident stayed with me. Ashton's eyes started to well up. I am present because I belong to that group and witnessed enough to realize misconduct, yet I failed to intervene adequately. The courtroom observers were completely taken aback. Ashton Kutcher, widely perceived as an amiable character, the astute tech entrepreneur, the devoted spouse, was now revealing aspects of a Hollywood confidentiality that few had ventured to address. And the revelations grew more somber. Kutcher's account moved from industry hearsay to first-hand revelations. The expression freak off, previously a subject of speculation on entertainment blogs and unnamed sources, was now being used in court. Could you define freak off? The prosecutor inquired. Ashton paused. It was a type of gathering Diddy organized, he responded. As these were private select events where phones were confiscated and attendees were blindfolded. At times it was framed as a form of performance art, but that wasn't its true nature. Not entirely. He recounted his first invitation to such an event in 2005. I believed it was a costume party, he stated. I attended with a companion, and within half an hour I wished I hadn't come. He refrained from detailing all his observations, but did share the following. Concealed recording devices were present. Some individuals appeared extremely frightened. Certain areas were off limits unless one received a specific signal, like a tap on the shoulder. The prosecutor then presented information found on a confiscated laptop. Ashton's name appeared on an electronic guest roster with a green light designation. This signified that I was considered trustworthy, he explained. I'm unsure how I gained that status, but I understood its implication. I had unrestricted access. He also mentioned being presented with papers to sign. Non-disclosure agreements prepared not only for attendees, but also for prominent performers, security personnel, and catering staff. The non-disclosure agreement I endorsed in 2010 spanned 28 pages, he stated. Nevertheless, I signed it. The court heard Ashton describe the challenge of disengaging from the situation. It's not merely declining an invitation to a party, he elaborated. It's withdrawing from an entire web of connections, a hierarchy of influence, a whole operational framework. He remembered an instance in 2014 when he attempted to cease his participation. I informed Diddy that I was finished, that it no longer suited me, and his response was, quitting isn't an option. You're either fully committed or completely excluded. Within that same week, Ashton asserted that 3 of his investment arrangements arrangements inexplicably collapsed. A common acquaintance contacted me saying, "You've unsettled someone important." Ashton concluded with a disturbing confession. "I was fearful not solely for my professional life, but also for my loved ones." Did he possess that kind of influence? People failed to grasp it. He didn't need to be loud. Simply ceasing to answer your calls was sufficient to ruin a person. Following this statement, the court declared a recess. Yet no one stirred as Ashton Kutcher, after many years, was at last speaking honestly. When the proceedings recommenced, the attention shifted from social events to more methodical matters, the monetary and commercial connections that had discreetly supported the way of life established by Ashton Kutcher and Sean Diddy Combs. An issue wasn't solely about activities occurring in exclusive settings. It concerned the financial backing of those activities. Kutcher had a reputation as an astute investor, involved in everything from fledgling tech companies to significant venture capital investments. He had established himself as a link between Hollywood and the tech industry. However, as he detailed the underlying network, a discernible trend became apparent. A significant number of his business arrangements involved individuals currently implicated in Diddy's controversy. In 2009, my engagements expanded beyond the entertainment sector, he stated. "I was connected with company founders and investment managers, and Sean possessed contacts that were inaccessible to most. He had the ability to create opportunities that even prominent venture capitalists could not." He detailed how Diddy introduced him to a group of global financiers, brand strategists, and influential figures in the nightclub scene. These individuals didn't merely host events, they established businesses based on them, he explained. There were marketing companies operating under the guise of nightclubs and investment collectives presented as lifestyle websites. It combined promotion, observation, and enlistment into a single entity. A particular name surfaced frequently. An unidentified investor connected to multiple ventures of Kutcher, who was subsequently found to have direct links to Combs' international business operations. Financial documents revealed substantial payments categorized merely as consulting or event management, yet the timing of these fund transfers frequently coincided with the dates of infamous private events. Ashton further confessed to the existence of shell corporations whose purposes he never completely grasped. "I was informed they were for safeguarding intellectual assets," he mentioned. However, in retrospect, their likely function was to obscure the true sources of funding. When questioned about his lack of further investigation, Ashton lowered his gaze. "Because the financial returns were substantial. Because I preferred not to be the person who made excessive inquiries." The prosecution presented a chronological account of investments, starting with Kutcher's participation in a select tech center in Los Angeles and extending to his collaboration on a nightclub-oriented application that ceased operations soon after obtaining millions in financial backing. This funding was traced to accounts currently under federal investigation and seizure. Kutcher acknowledged receiving progress reports from the app's management, but revealed that the user information gathered, including names, whereabouts, and biometric details, had been surreptitiously sold. "I was unaware," Ashton stated, "though perhaps I ought to have been." He also recounted an unsettling incident in 2016 when he was presented with a proposal for a new application created by one of Diddy's colleagues. The app was intended to facilitate direct connections between performers and producers, but a section detailing confidential background verifications and personality assessments caused me unease. I declined involvement with that project. What came to light was not merely a narrative of inappropriate gatherings. It was an entire system that obscured the distinction between the entertainment industry and more sinister dealings. And at the center of this were individuals recognizable from magazine front pages and award ceremonies. Yet covertly, they were profiting from undisclosed transactions. Over the passing years, Ashton Kutcher's group of associates diminished. The connection that formerly held the new Rat Pack together started to break apart, not due to public disgrace, but as a result of manipulation and power. It grew apparent that in this Hollywood brotherhood, allegiance was costly and disloyalty resulted in repercussions. Post-2014, circumstances shifted, he stated. Danny Masterson grew increasingly suspicious. Wilmer Valderrama began to create space, and I started to hear rumors he wasn't merely alluding to celebrity news. As per Kutcher, individuals near the group were discreetly disassociating, driven not by disputes but by apprehension. A particular friend ceased attending all functions. We assumed he was merely exhausted. Later, he contacted me saying that "You're all too informed. You need to leave." Kutcher asserted that once he started refusing specific invitations, events, investment opportunities, opportunities, social dinners, his circumstances began to change. Approved projects were abruptly cancelled. Public relations agreements collapsed, and some high-level contacts became unresponsive. It seemed as though I was being subtly excluded, he said. He described a disturbing meeting in early 2017 where he encountered Diddy at a charitable event. He embraced me, mentioned I'd been absent from things. Then he remarked, "It would be wise to be cautious about things you might not recall." That statement resonated with me. Soon after, Ashton reported receiving a USB storage device in an unmarked package at his workplace. It contained video from a 2012 gathering, nothing unlawful, merely awkward. The implication was clear, he said. He confessed that apprehension began to shape his choices. He remained silent. He avoided any confrontations. He attempted a gradual withdrawal, wishing to remain unnoticed, yet his efforts were always detected. Each instance I tried to distance myself, an issue would arise. He explained, media disclosure, a compromised email account, the menace of legal action, and I would hastily act to safeguard my reputation and my loved ones. However, his more profound worry was for something he couldn't shield: his moral integrity. Ashton recalled an evening in 2018 when a friend alerted him to an impending civil lawsuit targeting one of the Rat Pack associates. They advised, "Don't be troubled by this, we will manage it." It was at that point I understood it was no longer about camaraderie, it was about crisis management. He started to separate himself from all parties concerned, discreetly transferring assets, cutting off connections, and revising agreements. Despite these efforts, the past influences persisted. Professional contacts continued to mention Diddy's name with deference. Founders of tech companies would allude to confidential investment opportunities, and Ashton's only recourse was to offer a polite smile and acknowledgement. "It felt as if an inescapable shadow pursued me," he stated, "and the most regrettable aspect was my contribution to its creation." By the year 2020, Ashton Kutcher had made extensive efforts to purify his public persona. His financial ventures were presented as philanthropic. His public engagements projected an image of virtue. His domestic life was portrayed as idyllic. Yet beneath this facade, he was in flight. He was not the only one. The entertainment industry as a whole was undergoing transformation. The global health crisis compelled celebrities to withdraw from the public eye. Controversy started to emerge. In time, Diddy's name transitioned from hushed mentions to loud pronouncements. Upon learning of the initial law enforcement action, Ashton stated, "I felt no astonishment, only a sense of reprieve." This reprieve was short-lived, however, as it was quickly followed by legal summonses, media reports, and social platforms sharing long-lost photographs. Kutcher found himself implicated once more, and on this occasion, no public relations efforts could mitigate the harm. He recounted the day federal authorities arrived at one of his commercial locations with a search warrant. They sought entry to stored video, letters, and travel records. "I provided full cooperation." He also clarified his reasons for not making public statements during the early stages of the controversy. "I was apprehensive, not merely about the legal repercussions, but about the potential extent of the situation and the individuals it might affect." The most significant setback occurred in 2023 with the emergence of video from an event previously organized by both Kutcher and Combs in the Hamptons. The footage was not explicit, but it depicted social media personalities being escorted by assistants into restricted zones. On camera, Ashton was heard saying a single phrase, "Just ensure they remain composed until we commence." The release of this video altered everything. The situation was not as it appeared, he asserted in court. "We were conducting a promotional photo session, or at least that was my understanding. That is what I was informed." However, public opinion was unmoved. For an individual whose reputation was founded on appeal and reliability, the impact was devastating. He suffered the loss of promotional contracts. Technology associates started to create distance. Investment groups discreetly struck his name from their director lists. Amila, his spouse, was said to be extremely angered. "She implored me to disengage years prior," he stated. "I failed to heed her advice." Ashton recounted how his children started questioning the presence of shouting unfamiliar individuals outside their residence and the news vehicle stationed nearby. "I was compelled to clarify matters I struggled to comprehend myself." It concluded not with a dramatic event, but with a gradual collapse. A prominent Hollywood figure, previously considered invulnerable, was now witnessing the piecemeal disintegration of his domain. This was not due to his actions, but rather his unwillingness to acknowledge reality and, more critically, his failure to intervene. Ashton's tone softened as the discussion shifted to an individual he formerly considered a close friend, Danny Masterson. The change in atmosphere within the courtroom was palpable. Everyone present was aware of Masterson's destiny, found guilty and imprisoned. Yet previously unknown was the extent of his integration within this group, the reach of the power exerted to shield him, and Ashton Kutcher's greater involvement than he had earlier conceded. We rose through the ranks concurrently, Ashton started. We had everything in common: professional endeavors, social events, even financial backers. He explained that their time on That 70s Show encompassed more than just television production. Beyond the set, it was about building connections. Danny had ties to Scientology, Kutcher to technology and investment funding, and Diddy to the worlds of style and music. Fundamentally, they combined these influences into a single network of authority engineered to suppress opposition. What remains generally unknown, Ashton stated, is the manner in which this authority operated covertly. When Danny initially faced accusations, the response involved more than just legal representatives. It included the activation of obligations from individuals throughout various sectors. I observed this unfold. He remembered an especially unsettling night in 2017, shortly before Netflix removed Masterson from The Ranch. Kutcher mentioned a confidential dinner held in the Hollywood Hills. Executives, producers, several performers, and one of Diddy's legal advisors were present. The discussion did not concern Danny's guilt or innocence, but rather strategies for suppressing information. Records came to light revealing a series of exchanges between Kutcher and his staff, in which he proposed to handle the public perception related to Masterson. I believed I was assisting a companion, he stated. However, I failed to comprehend that I was contributing to the concealment of the facts. The court was presented with a memorandum from a public relations agency Kutcher engaged in 2018, which outlined a strategy to overwhelm internet search results with favorable reports concerning himself, Diddy, and Masterson. This initiative encompassed celebrity support, appearances at high-profile events, and discreet contributions to organizations supporting women, all coordinated with particular legal developments. I was apprehensive about the potential consequences if public sentiment turned against us, Ashton confessed. Consequently, I participated in the apparatus of diversion. He paused, then shared one of his most chilling disclosures. There was a telephone conversation in 2019. Danny was in a state of alarm. He indicated that if circumstances deteriorated, he would implicate others. When I inquired as to whom, he simply replied, "You are aware of who authorizes the payments." I understood his meaning. All members of that group did. At this juncture, it was clear to all observers this was not a case of Ashton Kutcher merely being incidentally present at an unfortunate time. This concerned an individual who had been sufficiently proximate to the core of the situation to witness its inner workings. He ultimately revealed the methods by which silence was procured and how this process had almost cost him his integrity. Ashton detailed what he termed the cleanup crew. It wasn't a single entity, he clarified, but rather an operational method, a plan. It involved individuals who resolved issues, chauffeurs, personal medical staff, media liaisons, and legal protectors. One could encounter a problematic situation and by the following day it would be entirely rectified. Individuals were compensated, narratives were suppressed, and occasionally recollections were also altered. He narrated an occurrence in 2015 at an international event. An attendee experienced a health crisis. A security detail swiftly intervened, escorted her away, and by the next morning the chamber where she was discovered had been renovated. I viewed the architectural plans, Ashton stated. The entire wall was concealed with reflective panels as if the incident had not occurred. He elaborated on a 3-level system for ensuring quiet, financial inducement, offers of employment, and intimidation. Certain individuals received vehicles, others secured roles in new television productions, and some were simply removed from guest lists. Financial documents were introduced indicating Ashton had approved disbursements via one of his limited liability companies to a media advisor who coincidentally had also been involved in crisis management for a fashion initiative led by Diddy during that period. When questioned about his motives, Ashton's response was straightforward: "Because I was unaware of any means of escape." He disclosed that starting in 2021, he discreetly began to disengage from particular undertakings. He cut off connections with Diddy's colleagues colleagues, shut down inactive enterprises, and even erased 10 years of photographs from online storage. However, the more earnestly he attempted to withdraw, the more his silence was scrutinized. Have you ever attempted to erase a segment of your existence? He inquired. The difficulty lies in the fact that another individual invariably possesses a duplicate. He mentioned a disturbing communication received by his wife, Mila Kunis, in early 2022, an image of her with their offspring, accompanied by a quotation from a legal agreement she had no knowledge of. It was not an act of intimidation, he clarified, but a signal that despite departing the scene, its influence remains. He concluded by Kutcher clarifying his reasons for ultimately testifying. Because I grew weary of self-effacement, he stated, because prolonged silence increasingly assimilated me into their ranks. Lord Ashton Kutcher remained motionless for a considerable time before resuming his speech, seemingly aware of the profound significance of this 9th segment, not merely for the judicial proceedings, but for the enduring reputation of all observers. This is not an effort to preserve my reputation, he declared. This is an endeavor to salvage any remaining recognizable aspect of my own identity. He was posed a concluding inquiry. If afforded the opportunity, would you revisit the past and alter any decisions? I would have disengaged, he replied. In 2005, upon first witnessing a closed door at one of those gatherings, I ought to have departed. Yet I did not. I remained. I conformed. I presented a cheerful facade at public events and promoted applications. While individuals suffered harm privately, he confessed to recently dispatching correspondence to some of the affected parties, not to seek pardon, he clarified, but merely to convey, I now comprehend the entirety of it. Before leaving the stand, Ashton addressed the judge. Your Honor, he stated, should this court require any further assistance from me, be it electronic mail, documents, or identities, I will offer no resistance. I have expended sufficient effort defending those undeserving. A profound silence enveloped the chamber. Even Diddy remained impassive, for at that instant, the courtroom was not occupied by famous personalities or powerful figures, but by the reverberations of truths they had all endeavored to conceal. Beyond the court, global attention was fixed. Regardless of whether one perceived Ashton as a protagonist seeking redemption or merely another culpable individual with a refined demeanor, one fact was undeniable. The veil was at last being drawn back from the illusion surrounding celebrity, and the reality it revealed was substantially more repellent than anyone was prepared to acknowledge.